Hello, my name's Toby and I'm the head of marketing and technology at IPSE. Today we're having a fireside chat with Luan Wise.
Hi, my name is Luan Wise. I'm a marketing consultant, social media specialist, author, and an IPSE ambassador.
Can you give me a quick 30 seconds who you are and what you do professionally?
Okay, so I'm a marketer. I've been a marketer for 25 years. Started off working in advertising agencies, then client side, and then running my own business for nearly 15 years now. And I do a mixture of consultancy and training.
What's one thing you love about self-employment?
I think the biggest thing I love about self-employment is that I have the freedom to choose what I do, who I work with, and how I run my working week.
Perfect. And if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
This was a really hard question because I was trying to think, would I do anything differently? And I don't think I would. But the biggest piece of advice would be to work with people who value and appreciate what you do.
Lovely. And what do you find the most challenging thing about working for yourself?
I think it's about switching off because you are running your own business, so you're always on. And I think the challenge that comes with that is being in the moment and enjoying what you're doing and appreciating where you are right now, because you have a tendency to worry about what's next or what's not happening.
Mm-hmm. To start us off, how long have you been self-employed and what made you decide to be self-employed?
Yeah, I've been self-employed almost 15 years now, and it was never part of my plan to set up my own business. It was never part of a career path that I thought I would have. But in my last corporate role, after I'd been there for 6 years, it turned into a discussion, kind of one of those times of year around where are you going? What's happening next? There were some internal restructures of the organization. And so, I kind of was like, what's happening? What am I doing? And for 6 months, it was decided that I would actually go and work for one of the shareholders' other businesses to do what I'd been doing because I'd been there for 6 years. It was a fast growth company. We'd grown from 3 million to 60 million turnover, from kind of 15 people to 60 people. So it was like, it had been a huge journey and I kept wanting to do more and to keep growing. So the decision to work for 6 months for another business and the business worked really well. And then we had a review meeting, sat around the table and kind of said, what's next? Is everyone happy? I said, yeah, but I'm now kind of doing 2 jobs. And, are we going to stay like this or not? And the directors were amazing and said, well, if you wanted to set up your own business, we could be your clients and you would then be free to go and work with other clients as well. So it was kind of an opportunity that was presented to me with clients from like minus day one. And so I, kind of thought, why not? Why would I not do it? So I had 3 months working with the directors to set up my own business, get ready. What was I going to do? And at that point where I could then start telling other people that I was doing this, I actually had another client secured before my official date, who was actually my first boss from my placement year on university. So kind of 15 years previous, kept in touch, said what I was doing. And that was probably, we'll come on to this, I'm sure, my realization that it's about your network and just letting people know what you're doing and what you're looking for. And so I had referrals from day one and almost switched from being an employee to it being clients and just working in a slightly different way.
Amazing. Well, we might as well jump straight into that then. So that is a powerful network.
Yeah.
How do you, I guess the broader question is then from that first day, how have you continued to build your client pool and use that network and kind of how else have you got your clients in?
I'm very grateful that all of my work over 15 years, I would say, has been through referrals and networking. I feel grateful that I haven't ever really done what I would call like new business or new business calls or emails or things like that. I've had conversations with people or referrals and built my business that way. It has changed over the 15 years. I obviously at some point stopped working with my previous employer as my client after about 2 or 3 years. I was very hands-on as like an outsourced marketing manager then and wanted to evolve that as well. So kind of the work has shifted over time. Sometimes I'm really hands-on with a client. Sometimes it is a lot more consultancy work. Shifted a lot during COVID, either way on that as well. But I like the ability to kind of change what I'm doing depending on the client and what their needs are at the time as well. So luckily, most of my clients have been long-term retainers or quite long-term initial projects that have turned into something. A couple of my clients I've been working with for over 6 years now.
I mean, that's obviously amazing. I mean, is there any particular reasons you put down to both getting lots of referrals? Are there any techniques that you think help that? And is there anything, the way you approach a client to encourage those longer term relationships? How do you find that works?
I think, again, it wasn't planned, which I'm a planner. Started to evolve is that I got involved with my local Chartered Institute of Marketing committee, which was about organising local networking events and kind of practitioner-led training events. Put my hand up one day and said, I'll do one. And then did a talk and that went well, and then did another one, and found that people came along to the talks and would follow up and send you a message. And that could be like the next week, or it could be like a year later, of almost like, I really liked your approach. I liked your style. We'd like to work with you. How could we make that happen? So I think it's been more organic of getting to know people and thinking we could work together in some way, rather than here's a brief, can you respond to this tender or pitch kind of thing? And I think that's what's been really nice.
Great. And I guess going back a bit more to when you built your business, was that more, when you started, was it more you as Luan Wise, this is me, this is what I'm selling?
Yeah.
And then my next question is, obviously you now have Lighthouse, and it'd be interesting to know how that came about, why you decided that shift from purely selling yourself and moving into a brand, and just tell us a bit more about Lighthouse.
So I think this is a really difficult decision for a freelancer or self-employed, and certainly 15 years ago when I set up, I don't think there was as many people being an independent freelancer. You kind of felt like you had to say we or position yourself as an agency that just, one person wasn't what people were looking for. But I did know from that point, and from working in corporates, that I didn't want to build an agency, and I wanted my business to just be me. I also have quite a unique name. So had spoken with some friends at the time, and it was like, what are you going to call your business? And I'd realised that, even when I was making phone calls inside a corporate, I would just say, hi, it's Luan. I didn't really say the company name. I didn't need to. So I just decided that I was going to use my name as my brand, and go from there, really. The Lighthouse, which is a dedicated website resource, came about as one of those COVID projects when you're reevaluating what you're doing. But what I'd started doing was like a weekly email newsletter around social media updates, and realised that I was sending people off to lots of other websites to find the full story, and that actually the email just existed on a Monday morning and there was no archive for it, no place to kind of go back and look unless you had, subscribed to all the emails. So I started putting the news stories that I was sharing in an email onto a single source website. So it's almost like a bit of an archive, really. It was and still is evolving. Like, should it be under my website, Luan Wise, or should it be a Lighthouse? But I wanted it to be almost a separate resource that I could direct people to, or people could find if they were looking for resources because they're working in social media, versus potentially looking for me as a consultant. So it's linked. It's a bit of a tricky one, but really it's a resource that I turn to find news over the past 5 years, and stand alone. But it will evolve again, I'm sure.
Yeah. So did you identify that as, I think, as people in marketing, keeping on top of the technology and the trends is one of the real big challenges? Is that kind of, you found that's what people wanted? They wanted more of keeping on top of it, understand what the updates are, and how do you keep on top of it?
I think one of the things I feel privileged to do working for myself is, obviously I can manage my own time, but I have the opportunity to learn and read and do all those things that potentially, if you're working inside an organisation, you're maybe tied up with people management or meetings and don't have time to almost do the proactive stuff. So I knew it was something that I was doing anyway, and that my clients and contacts found useful. So I just kind of thought I would scale it. And it's just something that I do every morning. I'm an early starter, so it's like, get up, make a cup of coffee, sit at my desk. I've got all the news websites bookmarked. The challenge is that there isn't another single source website. Like, you'll have Meta News on the Meta Newsroom, you'll have Instagram news on there and TikTok elsewhere. And then the tech websites tend to then have lots of tech news amongst the social media news. So I just wanted to pull out platform by platform and put it into boxes and categorize it, and then share the headlines on it. So it was it was for me, but then I found that other people found it useful, and doing it as a weekly and monthly roundup, you just become that go-to person. Like other people can then almost go, I don't need to do this because Luan's doing it for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we use it in-house IPSE. Yeah. I read it every week. So yeah, definitely anyone out there, sign up. It's very good. You have written and released several books. I have a few here. So we have Planning for Success. We have Using Social Media for Work. And most recently, Smart Social Media, which came out last month.
September.
Wonderful. And these are great. And I've actually got my name in the front of it because I read it and loved it. I think starting off, it'd be just great to hear a bit more about why did you start writing books? Like what sparked that desire, and how did you know you had something to share?
Yeah. So there's 3 of the books. Planning for Success had a first version in 2016 called Relax, It's Only Social Media. And I think originally back in 2016, it was a bucket list thing of things to do before I'm 40, wanted to do it. But I'd also started doing all those talks by then and those local events. So I had like loads of presentations that I'd spent time putting together. And what I discovered was after a talk, people were kind of like, what else have you got? And it was like, I only have so much consultancy time. And I've got all this content. So why not put it together in a book? And I thought about it. And then I went to a networking event locally in Gloucestershire in the January, and going round the table, a lady called Kim stood up and said she was a book writing coach, and if you had a book in you, she would help you make it happen. So I was like, that's the person I need. Went for coffee with her afterwards. And so Kim has been my book writing coach through all of them as that kind of just supporter, editor, running ideas past. So she kind of helped me make the first one happen, which I did in about 6 months. Wrote it in about 6 months and self-published it. Parked it, tick, bucket list, done. Then I had a coffee one day with Professor Laura Chamberlain at Warwick Business School, and was chatting to her about what I was doing, what I was working on, and how I'd started thinking about doing a second edition of the book. And if you've ever had coffee with a professor, the first thing they'll do is open their laptops up and go, okay, let's brainstorm this, or let's start thinking about this. And Laura encouraged me to do some research with her, which she fully supported. We did it in collaboration around all the questions that I had, or like assumptions I had, so that we could test them. Did a research questionnaire and qual interviews as well, and then used the answers to those as the underpinning of Planning for Success. The challenges around that was that we had our questionnaire ready in March 2020. And went ahead with it, which was actually really useful, because then we had a snapshot of how people working in B2B SMEs in the UK were using social media. So we had a snapshot. Obviously, work changed during COVID, and I took the decision to kind of park it for a little bit while I focused on consultancy work and training and other things. Still wanted to do the second edition, so came back to it, and we decided that we would do a second round of the research in November 2022 to see if things had changed. So Planning for Success ended up being almost something completely different to what Relax, It's Only Social Media was. So second version, published that last year. And while I was writing that, I had a referral from someone in my network to a contact at Bloomsbury to ask if I was available to write a small book, the social media at work, using social media for work. So small book, 15,000 words. Was I available to write this in 4 weeks? So I said yes, as you do when you work for yourself. You go, yeah, I can do that. Then you worry about it when you put the phone down. So I wrote that for them, and they were really pleased with it, said it was, a really clean edit, and then said, would you be interested in writing another book for us? And I was in the middle of Planning for Success, and I was like, of course you're going to say yes to Bloomsbury as a publisher and another option. And actually I looked at what I was doing and kind of went, I've almost got 2 books here. And I'd got a bit jumbled up with Planning for Success, of feeling like I was trying to put everything in one book. So actually having this other opportunity to split them out and 2 different topics. So Planning for Success is very much marketing fundamentals, how to write your social media plan, understand your audiences and things like that. Smart Social Media, published by Bloomsbury, is how to grow your business using social media. So very much focused on that. You might be a startup, you might be an established business, but how can social media help you grow and do that. So yeah, the opportunity came to me, but of course there is lots of work to do. So you have to kind of pitch and say why you're the right person to do it. I had 2 self-published titles by this time. I'd written for them and looked at what the gaps in the market were for this kind of book and kind of pitched it and went from there.
Great, fascinating. And you talked about, just going back to the earlier point about the snapshot from 2020 and then 2022, without giving away everything. But what were some of the key differences you found?
There actually wasn't any really big shifts, which was almost surprising, because the questions were things like, I know what the business objectives are for social media. I know how to measure social media. What was different was the qualitative interviews and the exploration around the topics, because in 2020 we were very much like not wanting to be salesy and changing what we were doing and how we were communicating, to perhaps almost coming out of it in 2022 and, you know, back on track and how the business was going. So fundamentally, the fear of using social media and why you're doing it and what it's trying to achieve in business hadn't significantly shifted, but things needed to start kind of moving on.
Fascinating. In terms of books, I'm just interested to know how it fits in your portfolio. Would you say it's kind of one of your key sort of revenue streams, or do you see it more as almost a credibility sort of add on to your main business of you and consultancy?
I would love for it to be a main revenue stream, but anyone that's published a book knows that it's not. But it doesn't stop you doing it, because it is all those other things around credibility and opportunities that it presents. It's something to talk about, even though kind of buy my book feels a little bit uncomfortable. It's still something that you can really talk about. But I think for me, what I found during the process was, it's a bit like writing presentations. It gives you that opportunity to think about, why do I do this? Or if you were to say something, I've got an example for that because I've already researched it. So I think fundamentally it was like what underpins my business and my consultancy, and taking that time away to research it and think about it, so that then when you're doing your client work, you've got all of that to kind of fall back on. The challenges was, how do I balance doing client work and earning money while I'm writing? And I did get to the point with the planning for success where I kind of said, do you know what, to get this done, I need to change something. I needed to find some time. And I guess it's that difference between working in your business and on your business. So I did actually make a conscious decision about my client portfolio, stopped doing something so that I could get the book done. What was also interesting was, like, I almost didn't want to finish it, because it's like having that side project that you're always thinking about, and you kind of dabble in and you're like, oh, I'll just pop this in here. It's almost like you don't actually want to finish it. But then knowing that I had another book deal, it was like, I have to finish this one because I've got another one to start.
Great. And is there any sort of tips or techniques you would advise other freelancers to let them understand if they have a book in them?
Yeah, I think it's about starting to put your ideas out there. So I'd say when I first started writing, I was probably testing some ideas with blogs as well to see what the feedback was, or testing it in presentations. I think it's about being focused, like, who is this for and what are you trying to help them achieve? Rather than, I think, all went down the route of like, this is a brain dump of everything I know and that's a book. Actually having some structure to it was important.
Yeah. And finally, you mentioned the new book deal. What can you tell us? What's in the pipeline?
Yeah, so, you finish one book and I was like, I think it took 10 days before I was like enticed by another opportunity. And the next one, which will be released in 2025, so we're kind of halfway through. And I say we because I'm co-writing it with an academic. So it's going to be an academic practitioner combined book where we're going to be explaining marketing theory and then bringing it to life with examples. So it's a really lovely partnership so far of like one person writing the academic theory, so we know who's writing which bits, but then kind of debating where an example needs to go, and is it an up-to-date example, or do we need to tweak it? We're very conscious that it needs to be relevant for a digital world and Gen Z coming through to Gen Alpha audiences as well. So with those examples, and yeah, just really fun writing and debating with an academic.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait. Cool. So you previously have spoken about creating an ecosystem, or in particular a content ecosystem around your businesses. Would you be able to explain a bit more about what that is for you, and how other freelancers could apply that to their businesses?
Yeah. So I think this content ecosystem is all about how I market myself as a freelancer, I guess. I've already mentioned social media updates and speaking at events, but you have to market yourself and you have to continually do it. And I guess with social media being my specialism, I have to be active and walk the walk on these platforms. But it's that balance of being in your business and on your business, and how much time can you spend realistically doing this. So almost like finding a way that you can make this happen so that you can keep showing up, you can become known for a topic or an area. Actually, it's not too difficult to sustain as well, because there is a big challenge of like not really being able to talk about your clients or who you're working for specifically or exactly what you're doing for them, because, you know, confidentiality and everything around that. So I took the social media updates. We've talked about, you know, that's a big pain point for other people. It's relatively easy for me to find that information over a cup of coffee, and it's always going to be relevant and happening. It's not going to be, I need to sit there one week and go, oh, what's happening in the world? What can I write about? Like, you know, that blank sheet of paper thing. So creating this ecosystem of, I guess it's about repurposing as well. You know, like I said, there's the email newsletter, then I can do social media posts, I can do webinars about it, I can take the webinar recordings and put them onto a YouTube list and talk about it. It's almost just become a bit of a process, but it keeps me up to date and keeps me in front of people without too much difficulty. So I'll share, you know, my email newsletter on a Monday morning is open up the previous one, strip the news headlines out, put the new ones in. It doesn't take up too much of my time, but it's really valuable to readers. And I think then it becomes about consistency as well. One of the other biggest challenges is that people will talk about one topic and then move on to something completely different, and then something completely different. It's like, no, you've actually really got to stick at one thing and become known for it. I do lots of other things that aren't social media updates, but it's about how can I stay visible and useful to my audiences in the easiest way for my time, and that doesn't cost me anything as well.
Yeah. And are there any, well, there's two follow-ups to that. Is there, how would you recommend other freelancers can find their niche and their specialism? It can be difficult, I guess, like you say, you talk about lots of different things, but how do you pick the right one?
I think this is one of those other challenges, is like you're told to niche and you're told to focus, and that's a really hard thing to do. Like, but I can do lots of things, but then people don't know what you can do for them, and you don't want to put yourself in a box, because what if that's not the right box to put yourself in? So I think it's about finding that, you know, the intersection of the two circles of like what you want to talk about and what people are going to find valuable, I think is the main thing. So I generally think like curating things for other people because they're busy, they don't have the time to do it, is quite a simple way of doing it. So think about, what is it your audience struggles with most? Is it productivity tips? Is it recommended tools or how-tos, or just the fact that you have read all the news this week so they don't have to? Make it quick win. Don't expect that everyone is actually going to read every single word you do. I know one of my clients, he says he doesn't read my newsletters, but the fact is I show up in his email inbox every Monday morning and my name's there. Yeah. And if that's enough, then that's going to work for all of us.
Great. And then off the back of that, once you found your niche, is there any tips or tools or software that you particularly use that helps create that ecosystem?
I think as a freelancer, I don't like spending money on, you know, your own business. So I don't want to spend money on lots of tools and subscriptions and things like that. So I do most of this manually. But I'll share the way that we run the Lighthouse. I work in the business with my husband, is that I read all the news in the morning, and then we have a WhatsApp between us, and then I put in the WhatsApp the news that I want to go on the website, and he'll put that on, and then at the end of the week I can take that and put it into the newsletter. So I think it's about finding your processes to make things streamlined, but I try not to use too many tools, because, you know, a small subscription here, a small subscription there can really add up and then put pressure on your business.
Yeah. So creating the habits.
Yeah. Yeah, habit stacking, I guess. Cup of coffee, read the news, pop it in WhatsApp.
Yeah. Perfect. Wonderful. How would you typically advise someone just starting out their business in self-employment, and where to start with social media? It's such a big thing.
It is a big thing, but I'd say take a step back and think about, who do you want to be working with? So who's your customer, ideal customer, and what are you selling to them? What's your product or service? What's that pain point? You need to get that bit right before you try and start marketing, because as a startup business, you will read all these big things about, you need to do this and you need to have a CRM and you need to be everywhere. And if you think that your target audience is everyone, you're not going, it's just going to be too distracting. And there is so many business books that literally say, focus on your target audience, and that bit's done in one sentence. And it's like, you need to spend a little bit more time on that bit of it. And I think if you do focus on that, you can change it over time if you pick the wrong one or want to expand. It's not set in stone, but decide that, then pick the social media platform where you're most likely to find them. And that is also, I would say, your comfort zone for communicating. So unless you are really visually led with photos and videos, don't go down the route of Instagram and TikTok, because it will be really difficult for you. So if you've got a B2B audience and you're happy with text, with maybe, using some royalty-free images to support it, go for LinkedIn. Don't overthink it and make it a big challenge for yourself. Do what comes naturally and use it as a networking tool. This is like for connecting with people and showing up in front of people. So I pick LinkedIn as my primary platform. I do a weekly post on there, but I spend more of my time sending messages to people. It's like the behind the scenes stuff. And I would say, whether you're a startup or maybe as you're growing your business, that's what I would advise to do. So for example, if I'm going to a conference, I will allocate time. I'm going to sweat my time that I'm spending at that conference. I will message every speaker beforehand to say, I'm coming to this conference, really looking forward to your session. Can we connect? If I don't do it beforehand, I'll do it afterwards saying, really enjoyed your session, would love to connect. With other speakers, if I'm at an event, connect, try and arrange follow-up coffees. Like literally just spend time saying, thank you, hello, how are you? How can we help? How can we support each other? Because you're trying to build relationships that are going to get you the referrals or the mentions when you're not in the room. So maybe don't worry so much about the big visible stuff that you think you need to be doing. Just send messages to people, say hello, ask people that have been doing what you're doing for a while to connect and maybe have a call and share some advice.
Just touching again on that important bit about target audience, and say, they've spent the time, they've figured out who their ideal customer is. How do you map that onto a social media platform and say that's the best one for that audience? Where's that kind of information?
You talk to those people that are in your target audience and you ask them the question. You say, how did you hear about me? Or, where would you go? Or how do you spend your time? It's back to the, old school days of what magazines do you read or what radio station do you listen to? You should be out there face to face talking with your target audience and asking those questions of them. But remember that sometimes the people that you end up working with, particularly if they're senior and C-suite director level, may not be the ones that are active on social media. It could be the people that are in their teams that are active on social media or networking at events. So try and think about like who's having those conversations and influencing as well. So many of my clients have come from people that I've had a coffee with. They may not be the person that I end up doing work with on a day-to-day, but they're the person that would say my name when there's a meeting going, oh, we need some help with, and put me forward.
Yeah, that sphere of influence. That's fascinating. And then, so if that's for starting up, someone who's more experienced, and I guess this could go either way, maybe they're more experienced in what they do, but they haven't come into social media, or they are using social media and they want to reevaluate. What would be your approach for those?
I think going back to that, it's really difficult to be talking about your clients and what you do for them. The approach I take is to really, in terms of content, to stay visible, is look at my diary and post what I'm doing and what I'm working on. And I will say that is why I do some of the things I do, like webinars or going to networking events or reading things or watching videos. I do it for content so that I've got something to talk about. And that's a visible way. So I'm going to this event tomorrow, who's going along? I'm working on this presentation topic. Has anyone got any thoughts on it? I've just read this brilliant book. What's on your top 10 list right now? So it's almost like doing things for content, but not in a kind of manipulative way, but just almost like, what would my audience be interested in that I'm doing? How can I show that I keep my skills up to date and that I'm doing these things that I keep telling you to do? And something that I've found recently that I have told other people to do, but it's always hard to follow your own advice. Don't just talk about the great things and all the positive and the successful things, but talk about the challenges as well. You know, go behind the scenes. And the post that I did after a friend encouraged me to do it was, I've done a few events where there's been tech fails. And, you know, you will have a tendency to go, here's a picture of me on stage and it was wonderful. But actually, it wasn't so wonderful when you're standing in front of 200 people and your mic stops working. So I shared that and, you know, what I did and how I felt about it. And actually that generated conversations as well. So just being human and narrating what you do, but being okay with what you're sharing. You know, you don't have to overshare every detail about your life. I'm not saying, you know, edited, but at the same time, yeah, people just want to know what you're doing and what you're working on so that it resonates with them and then doesn't feel so salesy as well.
Yeah. A big question.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a place for social media in every self-employed business?
No, because I think the answer is always going to be, it depends. A lot of people are on social media and active on social media, but if you as a self-employed person only need one client a year or, you know, 3 or 4 clients a year, you could spend a lot of time on social media that you might not need to. So I'd say, again, it comes back to knowing your audience, but thinking about those referrers as well, doing enough to stay visible and looking ahead to what your pipeline looks like. But not everyone does need to do that. They can build their business in other ways. We did before social media existed.
That's very true. That's very true. How would people decide, again, like, what's the balance they should be using and how they should be using it?
I think what you've got to do is you manage social media rather than let it manage you. And that, again, it's very easy to say because, you know, I am checking my phone all the time, but build your own habits. Ignore the, you have to do this X number of times a week or this number of times a day or at this time of day. Create your own level of consistency that you can manage and stay true to. So don't do loads of activity perhaps when you're quiet and then disappear again, because that's really hard to come back out of. Create your own schedule. So I tend to post on LinkedIn once, maybe twice a week, early in the morning. That's how I work. I've got myself into a habit now where I will do a 90-second reel to post on Instagram on a Monday morning. I do my email newsletter, then I do a reel and I post it. So I've almost, again, like created a habit stacking. And then when you're out at an event, you're taking photos and you're posting them in between. But that's all a habit rather than having to consciously go, I need to do something. So don't spend hours on it, but just kind of create your own calendar, I guess.
Again, around data, and there might be a collective sigh when I mention this topic, but artificial intelligence and AI is obviously a hot topic at the moment. How do you see that fitting in social media, but also freelancing as a whole? How do you use it? Where do you see some challenges and opportunities? You know, that whole picture, where do you sit on the conversation?
Yeah. So this, we can't deny it's happening. The tools are there. I think you've got to embrace them or you get left behind. I think one of the wonderful things about being a freelancer with these tools is I work by myself in my home office. So I feel like ChatGPT is my friend. I say please, I say hi, you know, I have conversations with it. I don't know which gender I'm going to refer to ChatGPT as, but I see it as my critical friend and my search tool and my support. And yeah, I use it, but then I will get annoyed with it and say, you know, that's not right and this is wrong, and you know, go off in other directions as if I'm having that kind of conversation. I think there's advantages in terms of productivity tools and, you know, help with copywriting. It's always easier than a blank sheet of paper, but the challenges around it are, is it up to date? Is it, you know, is it biased? It's terrible at accessibility. You can spot a LinkedIn post now a mile off if it's being purely cut and paste out of there. So I think it's a tool, but it's only as good as the prompt that you give it or your intention with it. And then you need to add the human elements after it. So I think it's a great tool. I think the social media platforms are adding some features which are good, some not so good because of the, you know, the bias and everything else around it. I think it's here to stay. But, you know, we didn't have easy to use website hosting or building tools 15 years ago. We didn't have graphics tools that meant that we could do all of this stuff. I think it adds to our skill set and all the things we could be doing. I know probably some people are scared of it in terms of replacing them, but if you're trying to create content that's your opinion or insights or current and up to date, I don't think an AI tool's quite there yet.
Yeah. And there was a point when we were talking before that you were mentioning around, if you do use it, being transparent with it.
Yeah.
And I think that was a really refreshing view to say, like, look, I use it and it's fine. I mean, how do you approach that?
So if I have used it for client work, I'll often kind of say, oh, I put this through ChatGPT and this is what it said, or this is what I've edited. Or I've worked with clients, you know, particularly in the earlier days, a year ago, is it okay to use it? Is it not okay? Because I've got some clients, particularly in professional services, who have kind of said their own AI policies, like it's okay to use, but don't put any client names or brand names or product names into it, and those kind of things. So it's about working with your clients to say, what's your AI policy? At the moment, they probably won't have one. So it could be like defining those. I think if you are using it, being completely transparent around did this with, or this is our starting point, I think this, and then editing it.
So you are an IPSE ambassador. Could you tell us how long you've been an IPSE member and what being an IPSE member and an IPSE ambassador kind of means to you? Yeah.
So I'm really grateful. Again, IPSE found me. I wasn't aware of you as an organisation, but I received a message, I think it was through LinkedIn, 7 or 8 years ago, inviting me to be a panellist on an International Women's Day event, which I took part in and was amazing, and then continued the conversation. Did more webinars, have presented at your National Freelancers Day. I think at one stage we were delivering webinars monthly. Beginning of COVID, we did a really quick series, didn't we, on like what to do now. And I think it's just developed into a really strong relationship of where if I see something that is relevant to freelancers or a conversation, I know you and the team to kind of drop you an email or a message that I've spotted this is a topic, or you will approach me and say, we're thinking of this, can we get your feedback? So I think from that initial kind of approach and connection, it's just developed into a resource for hopefully both sides. So I love being an ambassador because I have been doing this for a while. And as I said, ask others who are already doing this for advice and give your tips.
Yeah. Great. So thank you very much for joining us, Luan. It's been fascinating. I'm sure everyone watching would have taken a lot of tips and a lot of advice away. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.